Now, reading for meaning. In order to truly learn, you must engage yourself with the reading material. Simply reading a textbook chapter or reading and rereading your notes will not do. A lot of people just think if they read it and reread it and reread it and reread it, that will be sufficient. Well, it's certainly one step. It is a method that works for some people and for some pieces of information because it's just memorization sometimes. But to really learn, you should practice and incorporate a specific reading method into your repertoire. For example, the SQ3R method, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Because often you have to do more with the material that you're reading than just regurgitate it. Remember, that method of learning really doesn't work. Now, the steps for SQ3R are the following. S is for survey, Q is question, and then the 3 R's are read, recite, and review. Now, throughout this lecture, I sometimes say preview instead of survey, and I'll be introducing pieces from reading methods other than the SQ3R, but they all more or less fit into this format, and this is a very easy format to remember, so it's useful to start off. When reading a text, always take some time to preview. This would be the survey part of the SQ3R method. Preview the entire book when you first get it. Just familiarize yourself with it. Look at the contents, the index, and the glossary. How is the book laid out? Are there pictures, charts, graphs? Is there extra material at the end of chapters or the book? Are there practice questions at the end of each section or each chapter? Just knowing basically how the book is laid out will help you when you get down to the real study sessions. Then when reading a chapter, do another more thorough preview. Read the title and subtitles. Read the questions throughout or at the end of the chapter if there are any. Before you begin reading in earnest, ask yourself questions about what you are going to read. Use the headings and subheadings to help develop your questions. So this is the Q part of SQ3R. For example, if a subheading states types of precipitation, form a question. What are the different types of precipitation? Or if it said 3 types of precipitation, your question could be, what are the 3 types of precipitation? Now you can do this in your head or you can write it down. Writing it down will be very useful for when you do the taking notes section. But make sure you leave yourself room to write down the answers to these questions. Remember, all questions are a form of who, what, where, why, when, and how. It's quite easy and takes no time at all to formulate general questions about your reading selection, especially if you use the headings and subheadings as starters to formulate your questions. You become part of the learning experience if you do this. You are now fully engaged with the reading material rather than just being a spectator. You are now an active participant in your own education. How great is that? As you read, which is now the first R of SQ3R, look for the answers to your original questions. Note, more questions and answers may arise during your reading, and that's fine. You can just add them into your notes as you proceed. During the reading process, you should recite what you have read. This is the second R of SQ3R. After reading a paragraph or 2, maybe 3 or 4 if they're really small, turn away from the text and ask yourself, what was that? Make sure you understand what you've just read before proceeding. Of course, you won't have a complete understanding of the whole topic yet. Just make sure you do know what has been covered so far. Often people read without being actively engaged, and when they stop, if I ask, what did you just read? Or what was interesting about that topic? They have no idea. They don't know what they just read. They spent time, they did work, but they actually didn't achieve any results from that work. So you want to make sure that if you're spending the time and putting in some effort, that that effort is actually going to get you the results that you desire and you deserve. So using a method can really help in that regard. The recite stage is the time to take notes as well. This is the perfect opportunity for you to see if you've comprehended the material you've been reading. When you look away and ask yourself, what did I just read? You can take some notes. Of course, check with the text to make sure that you've noted everything correctly and that you've used the proper technical terms, etc. This is also a great time to write down the answers to the questions you asked in the Q section. And of course, you can take notes with pen and paper as indicated here. That's the method I still use. It's the one I'm accustomed to. But a lot of people take notes on electronic devices, computers, iPads, cell phones, etc. This is fine, but make sure that you're going to have access to the notes whenever you need them to prepare and to study and to work with your notes. Just taking a note isn't enough. You actually have to do something with them. So make sure that you always are going to have access and are going to be able to work with them. I still find that writing out some of your notes at least, even if you initially take them on a recording or on an electronic device, then writing some of them out sometimes really helps you to reword it in your own words, and it really seems to help with memory a lot more than just typing it or sort of texting it into your electronic device. So don't give up on pencil and paper or pen and paper. They're still very, very good methods. Not all the old methods should be thrown away. Now, as mentioned before, often students read without really paying attention to the words and meaning. Make sure this doesn't happen to you. Maybe you've noticed it's happened to you in the past. Or here's another example. Sometimes when we're watching television, we're tired, it's maybe the end of the day, or we're just taking a break, and we're watching the television, but we're really not paying that much attention. And someone walks into the room and says, "What are you watching?" Or "What's happening in this show?" And you think about it for a moment, and then you realize you have no idea. You've been watching, but you haven't really been watching. You haven't been engaged enough to even comprehend what's happening in the plot or in the story. So read with a purpose, and you will remember and learn far more information. If you don't remember what you read 2 minutes ago, you will not remember this information for the final exam. That's a guarantee. The last step in the sequence is review. Remember the 3 R's? Read, recite, review. Review the important points you underlined and in your notes. Check the accuracy of your memory. And quiz yourself. Are you still able to answer the questions you asked during the preview question steps? Or the SQ in SQ3R? If not, you should brush up on weak areas. I know. This may sound like a very long procedure. However, it doesn't take a lot of time once you are practicing it as part of your plan. In fact, it will save you time in the long run because your understanding of the material will be far more solid. Therefore, preparing for tests and exams will become easier and shorter. Following a method like this is far more successful than random readings and random study sessions. You have a plan, you engage yourself completely, you understand the material fully, and you have some excellent notes at the end. Perfect!
So in this lecture, we talked about reading for meaning, and it's so important to comprehend what you're reading, otherwise it's a waste of time. We spent a lot of time talking about a method like the SQ3R, but whatever method you use, make sure it has these essential components. You give a preview or survey of the material first, then you ask questions. Then you look for those answers when you're doing the reading. And then you want to recite the information, make sure you remember it, and then review the information. Very important. In the next lecture, we're going to be talking about listening for meaning. Also important, we often think of the reading part and forget that you need to comprehend when you're listening to lectures and podcasts and audiocasts as well. See you there.